People often say cheap is nasty, or worse, a trap. I should have remembered that saying. Well, on the afternoon of Saturday, November 14th passed, but at that time, all I saw was the bargain of the century. I'm a freelance wood furniture restorer living in Boston. My job is simple: hunting for old battered furniture at estate sales, bringing them back to restore and sell for a profit. I have done this for 4 years, and I am confident that I have eyes that can see the value beneath the dust of time. That day, I drove an old Ford pickup to a colonial-style house deep in the Berkshires, western Massachusetts. It was a total liquidation estate sale, a polite phrase to say the owner just died and the descendants want to get rid of everything as fast as possible. The house exuded the characteristic gloom of a New England winter. The sky was gray, the air smelled of rotting leaves and dampness. I squeezed past stacks of porcelain dishes and piles of moldy books to enter the master bedroom on the second floor, and that was when I saw it. A massive white oak armoire. It stood towering in the corner of the room, at least over 2 meters tall. The style was distinctly late 19th century Victorian, with exquisite carvings of winding vines along the 2 doors. The original varnish had dulled, turning to a dark tone, but the wood structure remained intact, surprisingly solid. I ran my hand over the door surface. It was ice cold, a bone-chilling cold that made me shiver and pull my hand back reflexively. I glanced at the price tag tied with jute twine on the brass door handle. I had to rub my eyes to be sure I wasn't seeing things. $50. $50 for a handcrafted piece of furniture from the 1922nd, with a real value of at least $2,000 after restoration. I thought someone must have missed a 0 or 2. You want to take it? I jumped. A woman about 60 years old, dressed in black, was standing right at the doorway. She looked at me, then looked at the wardrobe with eyes. I don't know how to describe it correctly. A look of both loathing and fear. This price. I hesitated, pointing at the tag. Is there a 0 missing? Solid oak like this. $50, she cut in, her voice dry. Or free is fine too, if you can get it out of here right now. Before dark, I froze. In this business, you never ask why the price is cheap. You pay and run. I immediately pulled a $50 bill from my wallet, shoving it into her hand before she changed her mind. She took the money but didn't count it, just stepped back, staying away from the wardrobe as if it radiated toxic radiation. It took nearly 45 minutes, and the reluctant help of 2 brawny young men accompanying me to get that monster down the narrow stairs. It was unreasonably heavy. I have carried oak wardrobes bigger than this, but this wardrobe felt dense, heavy, as if the inside was cast in lead rather than hollow wood. When we pushed it onto the pickup truck bed, I heard a strange sound, clunk, as if something loose was rolling around inside the cabinet. Hey, are you sure you cleared everything out inside? I called back to the woman standing on the porch. She didn't answer. She just stood there, arms crossed over her chest, and staring at my car until I started the engine. Through the rearview mirror, I saw her slam the front door shut just as my wheels rolled off the yard. It was 4:15 p.m. It started to get dark. I drove back to Boston with the triumphant feeling of a lottery winner, completely unaware that I was driving something worse than death home. I live in a studio apartment about 45 square meters wide in the Allston area, Boston. It is a cozy space, or to put it bluntly, cramped, located on the 3rd floor of an old brick building with no elevator. Getting that oak monster up to the house was truly a physical nightmare. I had to call Mark, a close friend from college, promising him a round of beer and pizza to get him to help. Mark is built like a tank, used to play football, yet the 2 of us took over an hour to inch the wardrobe up 3 flights of narrow stairs. The strange thing was its weight. It wasn't just heavy in the way solid wood is. While we tilted the wardrobe to squeeze past the turn on the 2nd floor, I swore its center of gravity shifted. Do you know the feeling of carrying a full bucket of water? The water sloshes, making the bucket wobble. This wardrobe was the same. Sometimes it bore down on my hands, as if wanting to drag me backward down the stairs. Other times it went surprisingly light, as if the mass inside slid towards Mark. Damn it, are you sure there isn't a dead body in here? Mark panted, sweating profusely, joking as we dropped the wardrobe onto the living room wooden floor. I forced a laugh, limbs trembling from exhaustion. I checked. It's empty. Probably old oak absorbs moisture, so it's heavy. Immediately, the space in the room changed. The wardrobe was oversized for the apartment's low ceiling. Shadows cast from it stretched across the floor, swallowing the light from the ceiling lamp. It stood there, towering, dark, and silent, exuding an overwhelming majesty that made my modern IKEA furniture look cheap and temporary. After Mark left, I opened a beer can, flopped onto the sofa to enjoy the results. That was when Buster appeared. Buster is my 6 kilograms orange tabby cat. He is a lazy, ridiculously friendly cat, usually rubbing against the legs of anyone who enters the house. But tonight, he didn't come to greet me. I saw him peeking from the kitchen door, eyes wide open, staring intently at the new wooden wardrobe in the corner. "Buster, come here," I called, patting my thigh. He didn't budge. His ears were flattened against his head, a sign of fear or aggression. When I stood up to pick him up, Buster backed away, back arcing, fur standing up along his spine. He emitted a low growl in his throat, a threatening sound I had never heard from him in 3 years of raising him. "Come on, it's just furniture," I muttered, stepping towards him. Buster hissed sharply, then turned and bolted straight into the bathroom, diving under the sink. I stood there, beer in hand, staring into the dark corner where the wardrobe stood. Maybe Buster's unfamiliar with the old owner's scent. Cats are sensitive to smells, I reassured myself. But when I approached the wardrobe to examine the carvings more closely, I realized the scent emanating from it was not just old wood. It had a rank, damp smell, like a flooded basement that had been sealed for years. And although the heater was set to 22 degrees Celsius, the air around the wardrobe was freezing. I closed the 2 wardrobe doors tight, turned the brass key with a loud click, and went to shower. That night was the first night I slept with my bargain, and it was also the last night I had a good sleep. Even if it was fitful, I am not a light sleeper. After a day of carrying furniture up and down 3 floors, I should have slept like the dead until noon the next day. But that night, something dragged me out of sleep violently. I stared wide-eyed at the pitch-black ceiling. My heart pounded in my chest. An indescribable nausea like when you dream of falling into an abyss and waking up right before hitting the ground. I reached for the phone on the bedside table. The screen light blinded me, making me squint. 3:17 a.m. The room was dead silent. Silent enough that I could hear the refrigerator motor humming from the kitchen, and the faint sound of traffic echoing from the Boston streets outside. There was no one in the house. "You're paranoid," I whispered, voice hoarse, intending to close my eyes and sleep. And then I heard it. Crack. A long, slow sound coming from the corner where the wardrobe stood. It wasn't like the skittering of mice or the sound of a draft. It sounded like wood bending, dry wood fibers stretching to withstand immense pressure. I sat up, holding my breath to listen. R-I-E-P. This time the sound sounded a bit wetter, like 2 pieces of wood rubbing together. Or, God, like someone stretching inside a box that is too tight. I turned on the nightlight. The sickly yellow light spilled out, pushing the darkness back to the corners of the walls. The wardrobe stood there, looming, silent. The 2 doors remained shut tight. The brass key was still inserted in the lock, turned horizontally in the locked position. I stepped out of bed, the wooden floor ice cold beneath my bare feet. I tiptoed closer to the wardrobe, feeling a mix of foolishness and fear. I am a carpenter, for God's sake. I know how wood works. Thermal expansion? I mumbled aloud to reassure myself. Warm house, cold wood. Humidity changes. It's just physics. That was the most logical explanation. Antique furniture pieces often sing when they change environments. Oak is a living wood. It reacts to temperature. I placed my hand on the wardrobe door to check the temperature. Cold. Still, stone cold. But what made me pull my hand back immediately was not the cold. It was the vibration. A very slight vibration, almost imperceptible, transmitting through the thick wood into my palm. Like when you touch a speaker playing music at a very low volume. There was movement inside. I pressed my ear against the 2-inch thick wooden door. Silence. The vibration stopped the moment I touched it. I stood there for 2 more minutes, feeling like an idiot stalking my own furniture at 3 a.m. Finally, I went back to bed, pulling the blanket over my head. Reason told me it was just physics. But intuition, the primal part of the brain that helped our ancestors survive in the jungle, screamed something else. It said that cracking sound was not wood shrinking. It was the sound of something testing the strength of the door latch from the inside. The next 2 days passed in a fake peace. I tried to convince myself that the incident the night before was just due to overactive imagination combined with exhaustion. I even bought a dehumidifier to place in the room to stabilize the wood, a pathetic attempt to use science to explain my irrational fear. Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting working at the desk, editing a photo of a newly finished coffee table to post on a sales website. It was 7:45 p.m. It was drizzling outside, the rain falling steadily on the window, creating a soothing background sound. Buster still insisted on holing up in the bathroom, only coming out to eat hastily, then diving back under the sink cabinet. I was focusing on removing a small scratch on the photo with Photoshop when that sound rang out. Knock, knock, knock. My hand froze on the computer mouse. The room's atmosphere seemed to freeze. That wasn't the sound of cracking wood, not the sound of mice running. It was the sound of knuckles rapping on solid wood. 3 knocks, clear, dry, and rhythmic. Slow, steady, intentional. I spun my chair around, staring at the oak wardrobe. It stood there, silent as a standing coffin. "Who's there?" I blurted out, a stupid reflex. Of course, no one answered. I held my breath, waiting. A minute passed in absolute silence. Just as I started to think I might have mistaken the rain tapping on the window, it rang out again, louder this time. Knock, knock, knock. It came from the left door, exactly at my eye level. The blood in my body felt like it drained from my face. I stood up, limbs stiff. Reason screamed at me to run out of the house immediately, but damn curiosity, the thing that killed the cat in the proverb, pushed me forward. I pulled the brass key from my pocket. I had removed it from the lock this morning to avoid losing it. My hand shook violently as I inserted the key. The metal clinking sounded piercing in the quiet room. Click. The latch opened. I grabbed the handle, took a deep breath, and yanked the door wide open, bracing myself to face a giant rat or a stray raccoon. Empty. Inside the wardrobe was completely empty. Only the wooden clothes rail lay horizontally, bare. No secret compartments, no animals, nothing at all. But the moment the door opened, a blast of icy air hit my face. It was so cold it made me squint. The cold didn't dissipate slowly, but rushed out as if I had just opened an industrial freezer running at full power. I reached my hand into that dark void. My arm hairs stood on end. The temperature inside must be at least 10 degrees Celsius lower than room temperature. I shone my phone flashlight into every corner. The joints were tight. The back panel of the wardrobe was a thick, solid piece of oak. Behind it was the drywall of my apartment. There was no place for a person, or even an animal, to hide and knock from the inside. I closed the wardrobe door, but didn't lock it. I backed away to the desk, eyes not leaving it. If no one was in there, then what knocked? And why was the air inside so cold, as if it was connected to an underground crypt? That night, I couldn't get a wink of sleep if I left the wardrobe door slightly ajar like that, although I reassured myself that the knocking could be due to water pipes rattling in the walls. A stupid explanation, I know, but instinct told me I had to seal that thing shut. Around 11 p.m., I took the heavy brass key and inserted it into the lock. I turned it hard twice. Click. Click. The sound of the iron bolt popping out, pinning tight into the wood frame, sounded sharp and solid. I even grabbed the handle and yanked it hard a few times to check. It was locked tight. Nothing could open it without the key. I left the key in the lock, a bad habit of mine to avoid losing it, then turned off the light and went to sleep. I pulled the blanket over my head, turned my back to the wardrobe, trying to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of my neck as if someone was staring at me from the darkness. I woke up at 8:30 the next morning. Weak winter sunlight crept through the window blinds, illuminating dust motes floating in the air. The morning air usually dissolves the invisible fears of the night, and I felt a bit ashamed of my panic yesterday. I sluggishly stepped out of bed, intending to go make coffee, but after only 2 steps, my bare foot stepped on something hard and ice cold on the wooden floor. I pulled my foot back, bending down to look. It was the wardrobe key. My heart skipped a beat. I stared blankly at it. The key lay in the middle of the floor, more than 2 meters away from the oak wardrobe. How? Even if it got loose and fell out of the lock, it would fall straight down to the foot of the wardrobe. It couldn't fly 2 meters away, unless someone threw it, or someone held it and threw it far away to clear the path. I slowly raised my head to look towards the corner of the room. My throat was dry, bitter with bile. The left wardrobe door, that was slightly ajar, not wide open, just a gap about 5 centimeters wide, enough for a hand to slip through, enough to look out. But what made me freeze wasn't the fact that the wardrobe had unlocked itself, but the darkness inside that gap. The room was flooded with daylight. Light should have penetrated that gap, illuminating the inside of the wardrobe. But no. The darkness inside that 5 centimeters gap was thick, pitch black, stubborn, devouring every ray of light that touched it. It was like India ink, or crude oil, not shadow. And from within that pitch black gap, I felt a presence, a gaze. Not hostile, nor angry, but waiting. I stood, rooted to the spot, hand gripping the cold key tight, feeling like I was being watched by something ancient and far more patient than I. I dared not approach to close it. For the first time since bringing it home, I truly regretted paying that $50. I am not a superstitious person. I am a carpenter, a person who works with measured numbers and tangible materials. If my senses deceive me, I will use technology to prove the truth. I need to know if someone is breaking into my house, or if I am truly losing my mind. That evening, before bed, I downloaded an app called Sleep Talk Recorder to my phone. It is designed to automatically trigger recording when it detects sound exceeding a certain decibel threshold. I placed the phone on the bedside table, microphone pointing at the wardrobe, plugged in the charger, and turned on the app. I locked the wardrobe again. This time, I even applied a layer of white duct tape over the door gap and the lock. If the key decided to fly again, it would have to tear through the tape first. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy head. The tape was still intact. The doors were still closed. I breathed a sigh of relief, picking up the phone to turn off the app, but the smile died on my lips when I looked at the screen. The app displayed a list of recordings saved during the night. Usually, it only records a few coughs, tossing and turning, or traffic noise. But this morning's list had an unusually long file. Start time, 2:14 a.m. Duration, 45 minutes, 12 seconds. My hand started shaking. With 45 minutes? What sound could last continuously for 45 minutes at 2 a.m.? I put on my headphones, turned the volume to max, and pressed play. The first few seconds were just white noise of the silent room. Then, at the 15th second, that sound began. S-crar, atch, S-crar, atch. It sounded like sandpaper, rubbing on rough wood. Steady, rhythmic. But when I listened closer, I realized it wasn't sandpaper. It sounded sharper, harder. It was the sound of fingernails. The sound of fingernails scratching the inside of the oak layer. Not scratching in panic or desperation to escape. Its rhythm was too calm, too slow. Scratch, stop, scratch, stop. Like someone sitting in the dark, patiently grinding their nails on the wood wall to kill time. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck, even though it was cold. That sound continued, monotonous and sickishly addictive, lasting for over 40 minutes. No breathing, no rustling of clothes, only the sound of nails on wood. I fast-forwarded to near the end of the recording. At the 44th minute, the scratching stopped abruptly. Absolute silence for about 10 seconds. I held my breath, pressing the headphones tight to my ears. And then, right next to the mic, or perhaps the sound pierced through space straight to my phone, a whisper rang out. It was so faint that without headphones, I would never have heard it. The voice sounded dry, like dry leaves crumbling, and genderless. So, cold. I yanked the headphones off, throwing the phone onto the mattress as if it had just caught fire. I backed away, back slamming into the wall, eyes staring fixedly at the wardrobe. The tape was still there, the door was still locked, but now I knew. Its silence was just a lie. Something was in there, and last night it complained about the cold. After hearing that recording, I intended to call the trash haulers immediately to take the wardrobe away, but that day was Sunday, and in Boston, you can't find anyone working on the Lord's Day unless you pay triple the price. I had to accept living with it for one more night, but the atmosphere in the apartment had changed completely. By midday, the initial gentle, musty smell, the characteristic scent of antiques, had disappeared. Instead, there was a new scent, disgusting and much more invasive. It started faintly, like the smell of old coins soaked in water. rusty metal smell. But as the afternoon wore on, it became increasingly overpowering and rank. It was the smell of copper, or more accurately, the smell of blood. It mingled with the smell of damp soil, the black, cold earth that you smell when digging deep into the ground on a rainy day. That mixture of blood and deadly soil enveloped my tiny room, thick enough that I felt like I could taste the iron in my mouth with every breath. I used a whole bottle of lemon-scented cleaner and white vinegar to wipe the wardrobe surface, hoping to mask that smell. I scrubbed frantically until my hands were red and raw, but it was useless. The smell was not on the surface of the varnish. It seemed to be oozing from the ancient oak fibers themselves, as if the tree used to build this wardrobe had been watered with blood instead of water. That night, I was so exhausted I passed out on the sofa, not daring to go to bed. Sleep was fitful, full of nightmares. I dreamed I was being buried alive, dirt filling my mouth, and a cold hand gripping my wrist tight, dragging me down deeper. Monday morning, I woke up aching all over, as if I had just been in a brawl. I stumbled into the bathroom to wash my face to wake up. When I looked in the mirror, I dropped the face towel to the floor. On my left bicep, the arm that hung off the edge of the sofa while sleeping, were distinct purple bruises. They were not random impact marks. There were 3 oval bruises, the size of thumb tips, arranged in a straight line, and opposite those 3 marks, on the inner bicep, was a larger bruise. It was a grip mark. Someone, or something, had gripped my arm tight while I slept. The grip force was strong enough to rupture the capillaries under the skin. I shuddered and tried fitting my right hand over the bruise. It didn't match. The fingers that made this bruise were much longer and thinner than mine. And based on the position of the thumb mark, that hand had grabbed me from below upwards. From under the sofa? Or from the floor? I whipped around to look at the living room. The wardrobe still stood there, silent, huge. The tape I applied last night had peeled half off, hanging down like a tattered surrender flag. I knew I couldn't hesitate any longer. I needed to know where this thing came from before getting rid of it. I needed to know what I was facing. I rummaged through my wallet, finding the crumpled handwritten receipt the woman in black had given me on Saturday. On it was written a name, E. Hawthorne, and an address in Lenox, Massachusetts. I dropped my work, spending the whole morning scouring online local newspaper archives. With a bit of keyword search skill, I found what I needed. A scanned article from the Berkshire Eagle, dated the 18th of December, 1924. The article headline chilled my spine. Day 6 of search for baby Alice. Hopes dim. I zoomed in on the faded black and white photo accompanying the article. It was an image of a girl about 7 years old, with big round eyes and a shy smile, holding a rag doll. The girl's name was Alice Hawthorne. According to the article, Alice disappeared on a fiercely stormy afternoon. The Hawthorne family was hosting a tea party. Alice and her cousins were playing hide and seek on the second floor. The last time anyone saw Alice, she was running towards her parents' bedroom, the very room where I bought the wardrobe. Police and volunteers searched the entire house, the surrounding woods, and even dredged the nearby lake. No trace, no footprints in the snow leading out. She just evaporated from the earth. But the end of the article was what made my heart stop. Mrs. Martha Hawthorne, the victim's mother, is currently under medical care for severe nervous breakdown. Witnesses said she repeatedly insisted she heard her daughter knocking on the walls of the house at night. Mrs. Hawthorne repeatedly tried to use an axe to destroy furniture in the master bedroom, claiming Alice was trapped in wood before being stopped by her husband. I stared at the computer screen, throat choked with bitterness. Trapped in wood. I remembered the sound knock, knock, knock. I remembered the whisper, so cold in the recording. December 1924 was a record winter in Massachusetts, and I remembered the bruise on my arm, the grip of a small hand. I turned back to look at the wardrobe. It still stood there, huge and silent. I suddenly realized a detail about the design of Victorian wardrobes that I had overlooked. To increase aesthetics and height, carpenters often designed a hollow space in the base, between the cabinet floor and the ground, a false bottom. Usually that space is only about 10-15 centimeters high, but with this massive wardrobe, the base was unusually high. I grabbed my crowbar and high-intensity flashlight. Fear was still there, but anger and morbid curiosity had overtaken it. I needed to see beneath the floor of that wardrobe. I knelt down in front of the wardrobe, hand gripping the crowbar tightly, cold sweat streaming down my spine, even though the room was freezing. The stench of blood and damp earth was now so strong it made my stomach churn, as if I were kneeling next to a freshly dug grave. I threw open both wardrobe doors. The space inside was pitch black, even though I had turned on all the lights in the room. I had to use a flashlight to look inside. The wardrobe floor was a thick oak plank, appearing seamless with the frame, but I knew carpenters of that time often used very clever joinery. I slipped the tip of the crowbar into the tiny gap between the floor and the side wall. Clack. I pushed down with all my might. The old wood groaned a piercing screech, sounding like breaking bones. I gritted my teeth, prying hard one more time. A rusty nail popped out, shooting into the wall. The wardrobe floorboard started to lift. A blast of icy air, colder than anything I had ever felt, cold as liquid nitrogen, blew straight into my face from the gap just created. My hands went numb, but I still tried to yank the board up and flip it over onto the floor. I shone the flashlight into the dark space, just revealed at the bottom of the wardrobe. It was a hollow compartment, about 20 centimeters high, running the width of the wardrobe. A perfect hiding place for a small child. There was no skeleton, no tattered clothes or old shoes. The space was empty, save for a thick layer of ash-gray dust. But when I picked up the floorboard, I just pried up and shone the light on its underside, the side facing down into that hollow. I dropped the flashlight. Oak is one of the hardest woods, yet the underside of that board was shredded. Not rat gnaw marks, not termite tracks. Thousands, tens of thousands of tiny scratches, parallel, overlapping each other. Some shallow, some so deep they embedded tiny opaque white fragments. I shuddered, realizing they could be broken fingernail fragments. In the left corner of the board, where the wood was worn down the most, were scribbled, shaky carvings. They were not carved with a knife, but worn down gradually by desperate persistence of someone dying slowly in the dark. I had to bring my eye close to read the distorted writing. Mami Dant, Lock. And below, another line fainter, written in a reddish-brown liquid, long dried. So dark. I backed away, gasping, a wave of nausea hitting me. I imagined 7-year-old Alice crawling into this secret bottom compartment to hide. Someone, maybe accidentally, or a cruel prank by the cousins, locked the latch from outside, or the old spring mechanism snapped shut on its own. She lay there, right beneath the coats, hanging in the wardrobe. She heard her parents calling her name. She knocked, scratched, screamed, but the 2-inch thick oak layer was too soundproof, and her knocking. The mother heard it, but thought it was a hallucination. This wardrobe is not haunted by a demon. It is a soundproof coffin, and I just opened its lid. I couldn't keep this thing in the house for another second. I didn't care about losing $50 or historical value. I had just dragged a child's coffin out of a stranger's house and put it in my bedroom. I frantically grabbed the remaining roll of wide duct tape, wrapping it tightly around the wardrobe, sealing the 2 doors together. I even pushed the heavy desk across in front of it, creating a physical barrier. I called Mark, leaving a voicemail with a tone almost like begging, telling him to bring the pickup truck early tomorrow morning. We would take it to the dump, or better yet, burn it to ash. That night, I turned on every light in the apartment. I sat huddled on the sofa in the farthest corner of the room, clutching a paring knife, eyes never leaving the looming black shadow blocked behind the desk. I didn't intend to sleep, but mental and physical exhaustion defeated me. I drifted off around 1 a.m., head drooping onto my chest. Bam! I shot up, almost falling off the sofa. My heart beat wildly as if wanting to burst out of my chest. The room was still lit, but the air was thick with a rank stench. Bam! Bam! The sound rang out violently, shaking the floor beneath my feet. No longer the timid ticking or knocking. This was the sound of punching. The punching of someone using all their might to break down the door to get in. I looked at the wardrobe. It was shaking violently. The heavy desk I used to block the door was being pushed back inch by inch. The duct tape stretched, making painful ripping sounds, about to snap. "Stop! Stop it!" I screamed, voice cracking with panic. But the punching didn't stop. Bam! 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 I backed towards the entrance, hand trembling, finding the house key to flee. But then, I froze. In that moment of horror, staring at the wardrobe, thrashing like a wounded beast, I realized something absurd. The wardrobe doors were vibrating outwards. Correct. But the banging sound, that heavy bam, it sounded dull, echoing like a sledgehammer hitting concrete. I held my breath, listening closer to the next hit. Bam! Plaster dust fell steadily from the ceiling, and I realized the horrifying truth. The banging was not coming from inside the wardrobe. It was coming from the wall behind the wardrobe. The wardrobe contained nothing inside it. It was a door, and something on the other side, inside the wall, or in some deep place that this wardrobe led to, was trying to punch through the barrier to enter my world. The wardrobe was not haunted. It was a passage, and I had stupidly unlocked it. The sound of the tape tearing was as piercing as a gunshot in the middle of the room. RIP. The pressure from inside, or from behind, was too great. The industrial-strength duct tape snapped. The 2 oak wardrobe doors burst open, slamming hard into the desk I used to block them, pushing it, sliding further across the wooden floor, creating a ghastly screeching sound. I screamed, backing up, until my back was pressed tight against the entrance door. I waited to see the cream-colored drywall of my apartment punched through. I waited to see brick and mortar falling apart. But no. What I saw before, my eyes tore my reality apart. The wardrobe frame was still there, but the thick oak back panel had vanished. The apartment wall behind it also vanished. Instead, a deep, sucking darkness opened up a narrow corridor, low ceiling, walls plastered with wet, water-soaked clay. It looked like a mining tunnel, or a giant grave extending infinitely. A foul wind blasted out from that cave, carrying the smell of tons of damp earth and rotting flesh, strong enough that I had to cover my mouth to stop from vomiting. And then, from the murky darkness of that ghostly corridor, something began to crawl out. First was a hand. It gripped the edge of the oak wardrobe floor. The hand was pale, wax white, with elongated fingers having more joints than a normal human. Fingernails were jet black, cracked, embedded with dirt and sand. It dragged along a skinny arm, spindly like a dry twig. "Mommy! Mommy!" The voice rang out from deep in the tunnel. Not the voice of a 7-year-old girl. It was a squelchy, wet sound, trying to mimic a child's voice, but gravely off-key. A head began to protrude from the darkness, hair matted with mud, covering the face. But I could see the mouth opening abnormally wide, pitch black, toothless, moving. Don't lock door. My body paralyzed. Survival instinct screamed at me to run, but primal horror had nailed my feet to the floor. I saw it trying to crawl through the wardrobe frame, trying to drag its elongated body, its deformed shape into my living room. It raised its head. Hair fell to the sides. Where eyes should have been were just 2 smooth, flat clay sockets. No eyes. But I knew it was looking at me. It reached that long, spindly hand towards me, cold. The moment those slimy fingers touched the edge of the desk, my paralysis shattered. I grabbed the bottle of paint thinner I had forgotten on the shoe rack near the door, rushed forward, splashed it straight into that pitch black hollow, and flicked the Zippo lighter in my hand. I don't remember clearly what happened immediately after that. My memory is a chaotic mess of fire, black smoke, blaring fire alarms, and screams. Not mine, but a piercing screech, like metal, grinding together, coming from within the flames. Police and firefighters said I was lucky. The fire had consumed the wardrobe and part of the floor, but they managed to extinguish it before it spread to other apartments. They concluded the cause was an electrical short or carelessness when using flammable chemicals. I didn't argue. I compensated the landlord for damages and moved out that very night. I left everything behind. Clothes, furniture, computer. I only took Buster. 6 months have passed. I moved to live in another state, thousands of miles away from Boston. I rented a ground floor apartment with no old furniture, no large wooden wardrobes. I used metal clothing racks and clear plastic boxes. I thought I had escaped. I thought the fire had closed that door, but I was wrong. 2 weeks ago, I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom. I reached out to close the small medicine cabinet door above the sink. Click. The door closed. And immediately, from behind that fragile mirror, knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks. Slow. Intentional. My heart stopped. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The smell of damp earth and rank blood rose up, overpowering the mint toothpaste scent. It didn't haunt the 1924 oak wardrobe. That wardrobe was just a door. And when I threw it open that night, that wardrobe was just a door. And when I threw it open that night, when I looked into it, I turned myself into the next door. It is here, right now. I am writing these lines, not to ask for advice. I write to warn you. If you go thrift shopping and see a piece of furniture so cheap it's unbelievable, don't buy it. And if you hear knocking from inside a wardrobe, kitchen cabinet, or even from inside your own walls, never answer. Never open the door. And most importantly, never look into the darkness inside for too long. Because right now, I can hear fingernails scratching lightly on the underside of the desk I am writing at. So cold.